Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I know that some have conflicts on Tuesday, so the numbers will be a little lower this evening. So we're recording so that friends and peers will be able to catch up. Okay. This evening's conversation is a recap of what we discussed on Thursday, and it will be the beginning of you all being able to ask questions and answers based on additional research you've been able to do, based on the additional time you've been able to spend with the resources provided and or resources you've been able to find on your own, um, and be able to just help clarify the process of the grant inquiry letter. Okay. So for those who want to follow along in regards to materials, there, of course, is information in weeks 9 and 10 entitled Grants. Um, the intro video is there, which some of you all probably watched to just let you know what we were doing, what we want to be discussing this week. Part 1 of the lecture is also posted from what we discussed on Thursday. There is a guide to proposal planning and writing. And that is a PDF with additional information regarding format and different things that are also listed in the notes that I have kind of compiled over just working on grants and doing different things here with additional resources and links and videos for you able to watch and just kind of intake that information. So again, last week we talked about the letter of inquiry, and we talked about it being an introduction to a fuller proposal. Okay. Now, I don't want you all to be confused by some of the smaller grants that in some cases are only 2 and 3 pages. They're a very quick proposal, maybe something you would write up to your local business to get them to sponsor something, or even a chain. Like, for instance, let's say Chick-fil-A. Say you were hosting a conference and you wanted Chick-fil-A to sponsor the breakfast. You could do that in a 2-page, 3-page letter. You could, walk that in, hand deliver it to a manager or operating owner and have that discussion in hopes that they would sponsor breakfast. And you all would negotiate what that would look like, whether that's actually some of the breakfast sandwiches or whether that is just some of their fruit cups and juice or what have you. And so that is just a small scale proposal that you could submit to a local organization. But what we're talking about for the inquiry letters are larger proposals, proposals you would be submitting to foundations, to both your local, county, and federal governments. And so these inquiry letters, which are 2 pages typically max, would be the summary or introduction of to a larger proposal. Okay. And so that's what we talked about last week. And in what we talked about in particular with the notes posted here, we went through the sections that you all should include in your inquiry letter. We talked about the introduction. We talked about the statement of need. We talked about your budget and a small little breakdown, talking about how you plan to use the funds. We talked about goals and objectives and the difference between the two, the goal being a larger umbrella and the objectives being finer bullet points that are measurable, meaning they have some sort of a timeline attached to them or some sort of percentage attached to them in which you would be able to calculate and measure with the objective. We talked about methods, meaning how you plan to actually achieve it, being sure that they're clear and logical. We talked about some sort of tracking or evaluation or monitoring method in which you would be able to just see how you're progressing along as well as after the fact, so you know what you need to do better the next time. And we talked about the conclusion, to include summarizing up that 2-page letter, but also to include your contact information. So they are clear who's writing the letter or who to at least contact on the organization's behalf. Because in some cases, individuals and companies, they will hire, they will outsource a grant writer. And so obviously the grant writer wouldn't put their contact information on there, but they would have, that development officer or the executive director's name as that contact information in regards to who they're following up with, unless you are allowing that contractor serve as your proxy, and they would, then put their information in, etc. So that's what we talked about in a nutshell. Earlier this week, I put up another folder just underneath of that information called additional resources. And in that folder are another series of resources. There's a sample letter of inquiry to a foundation. There's a letter of inquiry. There's a secondary sample here. And then the next three are a little fuller in length. One is called information of LOI. It does include a sample letter at the end of it, but again, it just reiterates the importance of having those sections in your letters. Fund to foundation letter to inquiry template. Again, it goes through that process. And I believe this is the template that even breaks down the letter and kind of talks about it even further in detail. And then write the letter a step in the right direction. It's just a online web article I was able to find, kind of blog like, that again just gives you in simple plain English the importance of formatting and specific language you could consider using in your letter. So between now and Thursday and Friday, you want to take the time to look at these additional resources to help you, again, compile your letter, which is due on Saturday. I want to take the time, I can't remember which one. I'll just go to the first one, and I'm going to share my screen just so that we can talk a little bit about one of them. And then from there, we'll go and open up the floor for questions. I know some of you have some questions already, and we can begin that dialogue and conversation so you can begin your work sooner than later. Okay, 1 second here. Are you all able to see this sample letter of inquiry to a foundation?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So this is, I'm just going to go through one of the resources. Again, additional resources are available for you, but we'll just go through this one a little briefly just to give you an idea. This is a very cut and dry template allowed for you to kind of, pull some ideas on language and or just formatting in regards to layout. Okay, as you see here, they plan to list their foundation's name and information and address, and then they're here deciding to, put the attention to and etc. For here, they are deciding to put the name of the project and or grant topic or title in which they're applying for, and then they go right into dear such and such. Some of these formats, you will see that individuals have decided not to name the project or grant. They do it in the letter or what have you. But again, that's what I mean by there are different ways to format and place how you want your reader to see your information. Okay, they go right into, again, this is a facetious letter, so they're using some, ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. And in this case, they say the XYZ organization is a private nonprofit agency that has taken the lead in providing temporary shelter for youth street in ABC city. So right here, they're listing who they are, they're listing where they're located, and they're talking immediately about what they're doing. So all in all, 3 major points already within their first line. Who they are, where they're located, and what they're about already. Okay. I'm writing to you to see if you would consider a proposal to expand the employment and counseling services available to these youth. Okay. Already telling them up front, this is what we're looking to do. This is what we need. This is how we need your support. Okay. Our organization currently operates 4 shelters serving 75 young people each night. This is an increase of 30% from last year. Our major goal is to convince these young people to seek some form of additional education to become employed and, where appropriate, to return home. So here they're expanding more about their mission, more about how they operate, and they talk specifically about a goal. In addition, if you all remember from last week's lecture, I informed you that these readers, these funders, they want to see stats. So specifically saying that there was a 30% increase from last year already lets the reader know that they're progressing in the work that they're doing. Okay. It also gives them a capacity of how many people they're serving. Okay. And it lets them know that they serve about 70 young people each night. Okay. Moving on to the third paragraph, it says, we believe our chances for accomplishing this would be improved by a person working among the shelters who could direct our residents to the alternative education, employment, health, and mental health counseling services available throughout the city. Your foundation has expressed a special interest in the coordination of services to young people. We hope that you will give our project further consideration. So here they pretty much remind the organization, although they already know what it is that you fund and how that our organization, in particular to the individuals writing this letter, how our organization fits within the cause and mission and folks you approve of funding. Okay, so that was, for them very key to put in there. There are other ways to state that. You could also state it and say, we see that you support organizations that offer additional services to youth to help facilitate a better lifestyle. There are multiple ways to play on words to say the same thing, okay? And here, this goes back to another goal. They haven't even mentioned the money yet, which is okay. There are a few letters that they don't mention money until page 2. I suggest you hit it earlier on, okay, in your letter. They've chosen to take a different route, which is okay. And they specifically talk about, again, they're already letting you know why they're in need. We believe our chances of accomplishing this will be improved by a person. This talks about a personnel operating staff, and they talk about already what that person will be doing to direct our residents in X, Y, and Z services available throughout the city. Okay, moving on to paragraph number 4. The other community services involved have pledged their cooperation. This is very key. We talked about this last week about being transparent about whether or not there are other folks on board partnering with you and or helping to fund a project, in particular one you're asking others for money, okay? Then they go on and say, they agree that a major problem in reaching these young people is the intake process, and that this can best be initiated at our shelters. We estimate the cost of this project the first year at blank amount of dollars, of which blank amount of dollars will be provided by the cooperating agencies. Okay. So not only are they letting them know that we have folk partnering with us and on board with us, but there are folk who've already given us a percentage of our monies. Okay. So maybe in the first year, they foresee the expenses being $250,000, of which maybe 150,000 will be provided by the other cooperating agencies, okay? So then they move on and say, we would like you to consider a proposal for the remainder. And that's, in this case, the remainder of the numbers we just made up would be $100,000. If you can prove that if we can prove, that our service is effective, we would qualify next year for some of the demonstration funds available through another agency. So they already are saying that, hey, if we can do this, we have yet another, let's say there are 2 or 3 other cooperating agencies. So we have a 4th agency that is already saying we will either match or we'll put another $50,000 or another $100,000, if in fact after a year you prove to be effective. So this lets this organization know that, hey, there are a lot of people backing them, a lot of people who already believe in this. Remember, I said last week you want to use buzzwords and phrases, if true and only true, that allow the reader to be in the positioning of saying, why not be a part of this? Why not be a part of this? Okay. They move on and say, I will be calling you shortly to seek an appointment to discuss this project. Miss Such and Such of DEF Agency, one of our past grantees, will be accompanying me. She is helping in the design of this project. Da, 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 da. In the meantime, would you please mail me your application guidelines and your instructions for preparing a completed request? A copy of our 50C3 letter is attached, etc. So, all in all, pretty decent letter. Some of the formatting, personally, I would have switched up a little bit. I would have talked about the money a little ahead of time. But again, you have to decide on your formatting. Some people want to focus on the story and sell the organization and sell the goal. And again, you can definitely do that and things of that nature here. They decided to attach their 501c3 letter. In some cases, if not attaching it here, you will definitely be required to attach it to your full proposal. In addition to all of the components we've talked about, there's also the additional materials section. And in most cases, your 501c3 letter is attached to that to confirm you are an existing good standing nonprofit organization and in good standing. And in other cases, that additional material can include letters of reference, or letters from those you have serviced. In this case, they're planning to bring someone that can, help sell that story of how wonderful the organization has been for their life and what they've been able to gain as a customer or constituent from the organization. Other materials that they may request are X amount of years of past financial statements. They may ask for 2 to 3 years. And so ideally, they want to make sure that you are going to be responsible with the money and that they see that you have already been responsible with monies you've already been awarded or you've already raised. And so they will ask for that. In some cases, they may ask for the 1 to 3 years or so of annual reports. And so there's a whole host of things that, depending on, as they mentioned here, guidelines and instructions or requirements, eligibility, they will request additional information. So this is just a sample. There are other samples in the other resources of that folder. I just wanted to go through this one with you all, just to show a different way of formatting, different possible language you can use and layout. But again, you're not required to do any of that in particular. Again, there are other formats that you may have found yourself or, just may be able to look at in additionally. So at this time, did I stop sharing my screen? I think I did. I'm going to open up the floor for questions on either what we've just discussed, either on our lecture last week, as well as, again, hoping that you all have been able to take the time to do additional research on your own, especially as you've been able to, hopefully you did do this, identify the organization in which you're going to represent, as if you yourself work for that organization or you yourself are the officer of development or you work within that development office, as well as have identified the foundation or corporation or individual. Maybe you've even identified an individual in which you plan to write your letter to. So again, for no rhyme, reason, or order, we can open up the floor for any questions or commentary, things that you've been realizing. Maybe there's been a common thread you've realized in some of your research or letters you've been able to look at or things of that nature. Maybe you've done some preliminary formatting of your letter and things of that nature. So yeah, so we'll open it up. I think, Siani, you were getting ready to say something?
Okay, so I am planning to do my letter the organization I'm doing is Active Minds, which is the organization I've kind of been doing
Mhm.
um, for like all my other assignments. And I was
Sure.
gonna do my letter to to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Okay.
But when I was looking through like their website and their different types of grants, um, I think I'm a little I'm a little confused on how I should write my letter, and also what I should include because only one of their grants has like an actual um, has an actual like a lot of information about it and says really how to apply. Um, but it talks mostly about like having a letter of intent for it. So I don't know if would have to like I don't know if that is what I would use for my inquiry letter, or if I
Yeah,
should just
so let me be
go with
let
the
me
regular
just
format.
clarify. You don't have to identify an actual grant. So I don't want that
Okay.
to be, you don't have to identify an actual grant. That we are working off of as if, there is one that exists and we're hoping that the letter we're submitting piques their interest. And as the letter we just read stated, could you please send me guidelines or instructions, etc. And we'll be able to, write a full proposal later. So your focus ought to be on the components in which we've talked about. So since you've identified your organization and the individual you're hoping to fund your organization, in particular, you representing that organization, you want to identify uh, whatever program, excuse me, that you want to work on. I'm assuming something that you're attempting to expand or increase that is already existing. So you want to identify that program, and then you want to take the time to break out that information per the components. You may not start with introduction, like I said, even though the introduction obviously is first in the letter, don't start there. Just break out your components and start with the things you know. How much money are you going to ask for? Just throw that dollar amount over there. What are some of the goals and objectives? Put that there. What is some of the history and background information about the organization? Where are you located? Who do you serve? What is the introduce the program? So just put these components on your paper underneath of these subject lines. And then you can begin to format your paper. Like I said, or your letter. Some letters even include those headers. They bold them, italicize them, and let it begin their paragraph. They will say background, they will say program, they will say organization, they will say situation, they will say methodology or tracking, they will say budget. And then they go into the paragraph about it in particular. So there are multiple ways to format it, but again, don't get bent on that. Get more involved with making sure that the information you're putting in the letter is accurate per that organization. It is a program that they have. You're attempting to expand that particular program. Or in this case, the letter we read, they're attempting to expand their personnel for operating staff to better serve, their constituents, and you go from there. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Anyone else?
So we don't have to choose a grant specifically for a program?
No,
No?
no, 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 no.
Oh, because I did that. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, no, no. Only because, now again, let me say this. There are some individuals who've done this work, especially if it was an organization that was close or dear to their heart. It was an organization that they were when they were a youth. So they did identify a grant. They did write an inquiry letter and they did introduce it to that organization. They went back to that director and said, hey, this is what I did in class. I don't know if you and your team can use it. This grant, comes up in spring. Here's an inquiry letter you could possibly use, and it gives you more time to put together a full proposal. So you're welcome to do that. But we won't be submitting these for real because we don't have the time to do a full grant proposal. So no, you don't have to attach it to a full existing grant proposal.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Second question, how in depth do we have to be with the budgetary parts? Because I know in the documented said we should be in depth. I don't know how in depth is in depth.
Yeah, so I don't want you to think about the way you would or even have been in some of your previous assignments where you've been a little bit more in depth about where the money is going and etc. But you do want to talk in my opinion, a little bit more than just the request. Okay, so if you're going to ask for the $100,000 and maybe you're breaking it up in quarters, you may want to say where 25% of it will cover operating cost, 50%, programming, and another 25. You see what I'm saying? You want to just kind of do a little bit of that, okay? So that they are clear, a little bit more clear about where it's going and how it's being utilized. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
I had a couple questions.
Sure.
My first question was, so on the assignment it says, you're trying to either build on a program or create a new one. And I was wondering if services are included in that, like if you're trying to start a new service for an organization, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then as far as format, because you did say that it kind of differs based on, what other people prefer and things like that. I was wondering if the format or the order that's in the rubric is like what you suggest would be, I guess, the most effective order, if that makes sense.
It is. It is. Now, again, you are going to run across quite a few. Um, for instance, where the acts for the 50,000 will be within the second sentence of the letter, but they'll drop down a little later and talk a little bit more about the 50,000. You know what I mean? Others will wait till later, like the letter we just read, to talk about money at all. So again, I am not going to take points off of you being creative in how you choose to format the letter. Just ensure that all of the parts are there and just ensure your letter flows and makes sense. Okay. So that's why I'm telling you all to take the time and just drop these comments and thoughts into these pockets, and then you can format, because you may already have a sentence that helps there, or you may need to think of a transitional kind of sentence to take you there. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And last question, sorry.
No, you're good.
So I identified my foundation and
Okay.
I started doing the heading
Great.
and sorry, I'm trying to find it. Okay, I was wondering, so I was looking at their site and like on
Mhm.
their contact us and they're applying for grants.
Yes.
And I was just wondering who I should address it to. They have both the executive director and the office manager's contacts, but when you go to the how you apply, it says that it goes to the grants committee first. So I was just wondering who would be like the proper person to address first.
So then you can say, Dear Grant Committee.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm. Yep.
Thanks.
Yep. You can say, Dear Grant Committee. Yep. Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I do. I have a few questions as
Great.
well. Okay, so for the project that I'm doing, it's
Mhm.
through IABD, but I don't really see how they receive the funds. I know it say that a grant supports them, so I was wondering if I had to like do deeper research and if the way that this certain project receive funds have to be included in a grant.
What do you mean by the way? You mean the way the organization receives funds? What do
Yes.
you mean specifically?
Like how do they increase their finances to support other organizations, because the organization helps different programs and performing arts through the struggles, like if they have like different emergencies like disasters and stuff,
Uh-huh.
and it's affected. So I can't really find how they receive the money to give to these organizations and programs who are affected in the disaster. So I'm not really sure what to do as far as that, and if that is something that.
So this is a general conversation. Typically, individuals like that, and it would be similar to like a church, for an example, that receives grants, that also receives individual donations through tithes and offerings, and they are able to help the needy. They're able to help their own members in case something happens. Um, And so usually they are applying for larger grants the same way a smaller nonprofit organization would. So in some cases, those funds are either temporary restricted or they're restricted for a particular cause. Some of them are unrestricted, meaning they can decide how they want to give as a whole. So that is probably what is the same thing for IEBD and any other organization. Now, if you want to know some specifics, then you could, probably, reach out to them, in particular DST, and have that conversation to get more understanding. But I don't believe that's going to really impact your letter per se, unless you're looking to do what exactly?
Um, I'm just looking. Well, I'm just trying to. Basically, my letter will be to. I'm not sure what organization I want it to be to yet, but it
Mhm.
just will be asking for more money to give to this organization so that they can contribute to the other organizations when they are facing these disasters.
Yeah, so Jakayla, I wouldn't focus so much on how IABD as an actual organization receives it, unless you're just, wanted to do some research, and you can probably schedule a meeting just for clarification on their particular general rules and procedures. I think what you want to focus more so on is identifying whether or not what the program is. So if they're doing an initiative because of COVID, or if they're doing an initiative to help sponsor someone's season or program initiative, you want to focus on that, to say we're seeking X amount of dollars to increase the capacity of organizations we serve, for them to, increase their impact in X, Y, and Z, or to help supplement organizations struggling to meet their basic needs of payroll or something to that. So you want to focus on it from that standpoint of how, if you did receive this money, how you would funnel it through whatever program or lane, and how your giving of those funds would increase the impact in your community, or arts industry, etc. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Also, sorry. The next question was for the team inclusion in the letter. How do we necessarily mention the team in it?
Yeah, so for instance, if you get into your budget breakdown, and in your letter in particular, you can talk about the development committee, the development committee thoroughly assesses organizations that are in need, to disperse funds fairly, to disperse funds with good standing of ethics. That's the way you introduce your team, to show the responsibility you have and some sort of policy you may have in which you are receiving and dispersing funds.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And the last two questions
Uh-huh.
is,
Uh-huh.
when you said we have to have a partner, do that actually have to be an actual person within a committee, and do it have to be mentioned in the letter?
What do you mean, a partner?
You said when, like, usually when you have like writing an inquiry letter, you have somebody supporting and helping you through the process.
Yeah, well, that's again, if you don't have someone on staff. Some nonprofits don't have someone on staff that's either excellent at writing, or even if they are, to help kind of edit. So they will hire a contractor, someone that writes grants and letters and things of that nature. But no, you don't have to as an organization. There are many individuals who do it themselves, and actually are awarded grants. So.
Okay, and this is the last question. Okay, for the budget,
Mhm.
do it have to be an actual budget, or do we have to like an actual budget that we see like on the organization's website, or do we create a budget for
Yeah,
that?
so that's the probably most made up part of the of the letter, would be the budget.
Okay.
And of course your name, because you don't represent the organization ideally, but you would be, or if you want to, you can put the name of someone that actually works at the organization, you can do that as well. But yeah, you would be making up the budget, but you want it to make sense, per what you're asking for and is trying to accomplish.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
I'm back. I have another question.
Great, no worries.
So in the PDF document, it talked a little bit about cost sharing as kind of like putting another incentive for them to invest in your grant proposal. And it's kind of a long story for a short question, but I'm going to be using Sasha Bruce Youth Work as my nonprofit, and I'm going to be adding. So right now they're having a fundraising event that they've already reached their goal, but you can still donate, and they're using it to provide cleaning supplies, weekly meals, housing, and like technology supplies for like online schooling. And so they have exceeded their goal by 150%. So I was wondering if it was legal because the service that I want to add it's with COVID-19 relief, kind of. It's like more towards like counseling and those kinds of services. And so I was wondering if it was legal to use the some extra money that was donated as like cost sharing, to be like, hey, we're going to reallocate some of these funds because the people that donated for that specific cause, the COVID-19 relief causes that was listed. I hope that makes sense.
So they donated to the COVID-19 cause and you're looking to reallocate it. How?
Using let's say like 5,000 of those dollars towards the new service to be, okay, we'll provide $5,000 if you can provide the rest of this money.
So what's the new service?
Oh, okay. So the new service will be a therapy dog to help with like they already have counseling services, but that will be added to the counseling service to help with like anxiety and depression and all those things. So yeah, that's the new service.
So it's a little tricky. It will depend on the specificity of the COVID-19 relief. Relief in what way? Did it say that it had to be the relief of utility bills or relief of rent or relief of food, or did it just say relief? And so that's going to depend on that. And the reason being is because if you stated that this new service of therapy was to help students who are impacted by COVID-19, maybe because they lost parents or something to that effect, you possibly is real thin line there, could utilize that in those efforts of offering relief. Because again, if they just said relief could mean multiple things: relief of mental things and capacities, etc., or was it just a financial capacity in which they had to meet?
On the website, it just says help a youth experiencing homelessness during COVID-19.
Yeah,
it wasn't. Oh, sorry for interrupting. It wasn't. It was just like another idea on top of it because I don't necessarily need it, but I thought it would be, if it was legal, of course, another way to provide like more incentive to get funds.
Yeah. That's pushing it a little bit, because then they may say, well, what does this? But again, when someone is close to homelessness or something traumatic to that arena, in some cases, not in some, they will attempt to get some sort of counseling for the child. And so maybe that is the effort in which you finagle that, is to say, in addition, we're wanting to offer this service as an extension to students who are in the process or dealt with it, or we saved them from homelessness prevention or etc. And this is a way of therapy that we're offering, either through their local school or through their community, whomever. But other than that, it's a little sketchy.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. But I mean, again, these are conversations organizations have. How can we stretch the dollar? How do we make this work? Is this possible? How restrictive is this? And another thing would be, for instance, if in fact you got to a point in place of say we were faring near the end of the pandemic and you had this extra money, you could simply write back to the organization and say, we've helped out this constituents as we best could. We are left with $3,000 and would like to apply it to offer blah, blah, blah. And they most likely would probably say yes. You get what I'm saying? So that's a way to make it a little bit more legal to go back to request that these monies be spent in this manner. Anybody else have any other questions or comments, thoughts as you've been, again, just diving more into your own research, diving into the research that has been, or resources that have also been provided to you? Anything? Okay, well, you know me, I do not hold you all for any reason. So this has been a great, just open discussion. Again, Thursday's class is available to you beginning right at 6 p.m. You can log on through this same link. I will make myself available for about 30 minutes or so for any questions that anyone may have. Even if you feel that you may not have any questions, sometimes just logging on to hear someone else's question kind of helps clarify and confirms or brings another idea to you. So even if you don't have a question, you may want to just, loop yourself in just to see what someone else questions may be, especially since some of the folk who would normally be on the call aren't on the call. And so after they, read information, you'd be surprised what they come up with in regards to questions. So don't, be shy. But again, if you feel that you're good and you don't need to comment, no worries, no pressure. But again, I'll be available for the first 30 minutes or so of class for any questions and answers that you all will need to best help you complete your assignment that's due for Saturday. Okay. And I would suggest that you don't wait to Friday to start writing. I suggest you find some time, even tonight if you have it, as you're munching on your dinner or whatever, just jot down some things. You'd be surprised as you start putting things together, other questions you may have, or just want to make sure you're heading in the right direction, or just another way to reword something. So even if it's not me, reach out to a peer that's in a working group with you, or just, already in the class. And sometimes, just helping each other out. Sometimes because we're living with this information day in, day out, but having someone else to review it brings another light bulb, a different perspective, as you all are seeing, as you're doing with your discussion posts and things. So I would suggest that you don't wait, begin to try to write between tonight and tomorrow. Again, just putting some things down on paper, because that way, in some cases, you may have a question for Thursday. Okay, then you have that Friday to tighten it up. Saturday, you want to open it up with fresh eyes and be able to do your final edits and submit. Okay. But again, if that is it, I thank you all for this evening. And again, I'm available if you need me. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Take care.